District Governor, Kevin, past International Director, Tony Benbow, AOM, Leos, Lions, Lionesses, Conventioneers all. Okay, well, I'm really pleased to be back here at N1. We actually don't tend to attend the conventions in Queensland because we like coming to the N1 conventions better. So, thank you for having us. Okay, back here. You've heard the credentials. Hopefully, the presentation will live up to the expectations. So it's going to be a little interactive. So what I'd like you to do is to make sure that you've got a pen and a piece of paper or a notepad handy, because we are going to be using that. So we'll be getting you to do a few little activities, chatting at your table, and then hopefully a few of you will be willing to share some of those during the session. So I'll just give you a moment to take out a pen and paper. Okay, while you do that, I'm just going to give you a bit of an overview of the kind of work we do. So I'm the co-director of the Centre for Behavioural Economics, Society and Technology at QUT. The acronym is BEST, so we're the best centre at QUT. We're the best centre in the world, and anyone who joins our mailing list we call our best friends. And I want to have people who are on the mailing list for a while become our BFFs, so our best friends forever. So basically what we do is work with government, we work with industry, and we work with non-profit organisations in a whole range of different areas, and we bring psychology thinking. We like to, I guess, unpack what are some of the reasons why people don't engage in positive behaviours. Why don't we eat our regular fruit and veg every day? Why don't we exercise enough? Why do we drink a lot? Why might we forget to recycle? And so we use the theories and frameworks from the behavioural sciences to basically make it easy or easier for people to do things that lead to a better world and a better life. So that's kind of the overview of the discipline approach that I come from. So what I'm going to do today is go through a little bit about, well, what is innovation and why do we need it? I'm going to give you some case examples of firms that had to change dramatically what they did during COVID and have been very successful. And then I'm going to show you some techniques for creative thinking for innovation. This is where I'm going to get you to start applying some of the ideas. And hopefully you can take these techniques away to your club and think about what might you be able to do as we progress through COVID and then beyond COVID into doing things maybe a little differently. I'll then talk to you about, well, why do people resist innovation? We have all these great ideas, how come we can't get change done? And then finally, some strategies to reduce resistance, and then we'll conclude. So basically, what is innovation? I like Latin. I sort of learnt it as a bit of a hobby when I was younger, and I think it's really important to actually go back to Latin roots to understand the meaning of words, so I really like that. So for those of you who are also interested in Latin, the term innovative comes from the meaning to renew or to change. And so when we talk about innovation, we're talking about a process of transforming an organisation or transforming the services or even transforming the way that we might do fundraising. And the idea is to make yourself stand out. So that makes innovation risky. A lot of people don't want to stand out, they want to blend in. They don't want to do anything differently because if they fail, they could look silly, or worse, you lose money. And so what I think what you need to frame today with is how much of a risk are you willing to take? How much are you willing to stand out from the crowd and do something different? And yeah, it might not work the first time. But we know that when Edison invented the light bulb, it took him about 9,900 times he failed. Now if he'd given up at attempt 80, well, the world would be a very different place. So in your clubs, when you go back, you need to say, are we willing to take a risk? Are we willing to try things? Because if you don't take a risk, you actually can't innovate. And if you don't innovate, as an organisation, you die. So take out your pen and paper. We're going to do a quick quiz here and see who invented this. So these are innovations over the years. Okay, so let's do the first one. Who invented the Band-Aid strip? So don't call it out, just write it down. Was it Heron, Johnson & Johnson, John Sands, or Pfizer? So just put the number down on your piece of paper. No talking. Okay, the next question. Which culture invented toothpaste? The Etruscans, the ancient Egyptians, the British, or the ancient Romans? Been around a while. Which famous brand was originally called Backrub? Was it Bing, Yahoo, Facebook, or Google? And last question. In 1994, Pepsi released Crystal Pepsi. I don't know if any of you remember it. And it failed. It's one of the very few failures Pepsi's had. Why did it fail? Was it because cola is supposed to be brown and not clear? Was it consumers thought it was lemonade? Was it consumers couldn't make sense of why they changed the colour, or was it all of the above? Okay, so I'm going to bring the answers up now, and it's an honour system, so mark it off. So the first one was Johnson & Johnson invented the Band-Aid. It's a brand. Second one, the ancient Egyptians invented toothpaste. The next one, answer 4, it was Google. Imagine saying, let's backrub that, as opposed to let's Google it. Yeah, I think that was a good move, actually. And the last one, Crystal Pepsi, it was all of the above. Okay, who got 1 right? Put your hand up. Okay, who got 2 right? Who got 3 right? And who got 4 right? Well done. Very good. Okay, that kind of gets us a little in the mood, a little warmed up. Okay, so why do we need innovation? Well, these are, I guess, 3 key reasons. Well, it improves the economy and society. It helps you grow your organisation and achieve your goals. So if you want to grow your organisation and achieve your goals, you have to innovate in some way. And it helps you meet the changing needs of customers or members or your community because you create value. And value changes over time. What we think is valuable in our life now is different to what we thought 10 years ago, to what our parents thought was valuable, and what our children and grandchildren and so on will think is valuable. So because our idea of what is valuable in our life changes, so too does the service offering that we need to deliver. So even if we're successful now, it doesn't mean we're going to be successful in the future if our service delivery doesn't keep up with the changing needs of other people. So some examples here, Blockbuster. Who was a member of Blockbuster? Who ever used Blockbuster to get videos? Yep, a few people. Well, it doesn't exist anymore. It was huge, global brand. Why did it fail? What didn't it do? Any ideas?
Missed technology.
Pardon?
Missed the changes in technology.
Yes, and what did they miss?
The customers' demand.
Yeah, people didn't want to drive anymore to go get the video out and pay $5. They wanted the video to come to them. And what was really interesting here is there was very clear signs of what the customers wanted very, very early. Does anyone know what some of those signs were?
Not returning the video.
Yeah, not returning the video. Yep, that's a sign.
Piracy.
Pardon?
Piracy.
Piracy. Yeah. So when there is a need that's unmet in the market and organisations don't offer a service, customers will invent it themselves. And it was a really clear opportunity that Blockbuster should have seen that people were uploading their movies for free on the internet so other people could download it. So people were illegally streaming. Now the way Blockbuster responded was to litigate, to try and change the behaviour through law. Now when customers really want something, they're going to find a way. And that was a massive missed opportunity by Blockbuster. Instead of saying, okay, they don't want to do it this way, we can fight it by law, or we can think of another way of delivering our videos. They've got a massive brand out there, they've got members. totally missed the opportunity. What was the company that came in that actually spotted this opportunity? Netflix. So are there opportunities out there that we as Lions are not seeing? So if people aren't joining or people aren't participating, why are they not doing it? Do we keep trying to push our current way of doing things on them? Or do we say, all right, people don't want to sign up because they don't want to be members for a year. They don't want to come to every meeting. So what might we do? Do we still say, no, we meet every month and this is how we do it. If you're going to be a member, you've got to do it this way, right? Or maybe there is room for members who are more project-based. You could be a Lion, sign up to help with a particular event. And you just have to do it once. But you know what, if they come along and they enjoy it, they might sign up again and again and again. So some people can't commit and don't want to commit for something that's ongoing. And part of the reason is because they don't want to have to pull out, because that's embarrassing and they feel like they let the team down. So they don't engage in the beginning. So we have to think about, are we willing to do that? Now maybe we're not, and that's okay. But if more and more people want to do things differently to the way we're doing it, at some point we have to say, do we need to do something a bit different for some people? The second one, Pet Stop. This is RSPCA in South Australia. Anyone have heard of this app? What does it do? Yeah, it tells you where you can take your dog to go to a cafe or a restaurant. It uses Google Maps. It's pretty cool, you know. You want to know, well, that's a pet-friendly place. And you just go onto Google Map and you put it in and it links into the app. And then you know where to go, how to get there, you've got all your directions. I think it's a really great way of encouraging pet ownership, because a lot of people don't want to have dogs because they don't know where to go with them, where to even stay in accommodation. If you take away that barrier, that's one more step people are taking towards adopting a pet. So they could have had lots of TV ads telling people the benefits of having a pet. Instead, they actually developed a service that addressed and overcame one of those barriers. So that's been a really big success. The last one, Kodak. It's a Kodak moment. What happened?
Well, they got caught pirating Polaroid's technology. That was one thing.
They did.
And they didn't adopt the principle of digital photography and printing through computers and so forth. They still wanted to send you film and papers.
Yep, so they went, you know what? We've been here for 100 years.
And
Film
we
is
know
better.
how to do it.
This digital stuff, it won't last. How many organisations do we know that have been around 100 years and say, no, we've done this well for 100 years. We're the leaders in the world.
The Swiss
We'll be
watch,
right.
the Swiss watch is another example.
Lego is also another example. So in 2012, Kodak filed for bankruptcy. Now Kodak, and the reason I've got a question mark there, is actually Kodak's making a comeback, but it's not in photography. Anyone know what industry it is?
X-rays.
Paper.
Chemicals, of all things. So there's a big question mark at the moment about whether they're going to actually really take off and become this major manufacturer, or whether or not it won't work. So last year, they had the backing of the federal US government with some funding. So it'd be interesting to keep an eye on Kodak. They're keeping the brand, they're keeping the name, but they've totally reinvented themselves in the chemical area. So that's hence the question mark. But if they had stuck to photography, then they were out of business, and it was too late in terms of digital. They missed the boat there. So what do we need in a crisis? A lot of information here. The slides will be available for anyone interested. So this was a study that was done in Europe. It was done on over 200 businesses. It wasn't a survey, it was actually their annual report data. And they covered a whole range of different industries. And what they wanted to see is, in a crisis, what strategy seemed to work the best in terms of survival. So there's three ways you can respond to a crisis. You can expand. You can say, everyone else is contracting, they're all pulling back. No, we're going to grow. We're going to get bigger. So we're going to have a growth orientation. The second one is a cost orientation. Oh, geez, we need to cut back costs. need to get rid of staff, we're all going to bunker down and then, it will re-emerge when the crisis is over. Or there's a balancing act between, we kind of should grow a little, but we've got to kind of watch our costs. So they're the three options that you've got in a crisis. And these are the survival rates. So this is the empirical analysis of all of this data of these companies. So if you have a growth mindset, if you're determined to expand, you're more likely to succeed. Your survival rate is 77%. If you do a cost orientation and you cut back, it's 50-50. It could go either way. And if you do a resource balancing, it's 61% chance. So if you were the CEO of a company or the head of Lions and you had that information, what would be your strategic recommendation?
Commitment to expand.
Yeah, it's like, I'm a scientist. This is the data. Of course, the trick is, how do you do that? Right? It's easy to say, hey, let's expand. So as we move, I guess, into 2021, it's been let's face it, it was a dreadful year last year. We were all touched personally in some way. And we can go into 2021 with a mindset of it's still bad and everything's really negative. And we can have that kind of pullback sort of mentality. Or we can go, you know what? This is it. This is life. This is the way it is. We're not getting any extra time. We don't get to reset the clock. We have to keep moving forward. And we want to do it with a positive spirit. Because if we have a positive spirit, then we inspire other people around us with a positive spirit. So the trick is we need to have this growth mindset. We need to look at what we do and how we might do it better. And then the question is, well, how do we do that? And hopefully I'll give you some tips on that. Okay, so here's some examples of companies that were faced with huge challenge during COVID. So some of them are Queensland, some of them are not. So, rum distilleries, trucking along very nicely, COVID hits. And in fact, the alcohol industry actually did quite well. When we went into lockdown in Brisbane, there was a rush at Dan Murphy's, the bottle shop, and there was quotas set on the number of six-packs that you could take out in bottles of alcohol as everyone was stocking up for the lockdown. So I think the alcohol industry actually did quite well. However, there was a need for hand sanitizer. Hand sanitizer is based on alcohol. And so there were rum distilleries all around the country, including WA, including Beeley Distillery in Brisbane, that basically retooled pretty easily, and then they were able to manufacture hand sanitizer. So they're now making money out of rum and hand sanitizer, two things that just you wouldn't think would go together. Okay, so suddenly holidays are over, at least, going outside our cities. We certainly can't go outside the country. So vacations to self-isolation staycations. So there was a firm in Melbourne, Beyond a Group, and so they offered COVID-19 friendly Airbnb packages for people who chose to self-isolate. So instead of seeing the lack of tourism as a problem and just downing tools, they went, well, we've got this stuff, what other things can we do? And they had to be pretty creative about it. And they've done quite well. Dine-in to drive-through. Suddenly you can't dine in at a restaurant. And a lot of restaurants did actually just shut up shop. But then there were other ones that went, okay, we've still got the kitchen, people still need to eat. What else can we do? We saw quite a lot of innovation in this space. So this one, again, in Melbourne. Now, these are competitors. And they actually came together under a drive-through initiative. So instead of competing, with the cafe down the road, they went, we're better off doing this collectively and going in as a group. And they didn't want to use the delivery apps to deliver the service, but they knew they couldn't do it on their own as a business. So they came together and set up this group called Chat Drive-Through. And basically, more than 200 cafes signed up. It was a small radius, so they knew they could get the deliveries. And then they were able to get their food out, not pay the fees to Uber Eats or Didi or whoever it was, and they had some level of control over the delivery side of things. And they were then able to keep their staff on, meet demand, and move forward. And in fact, when the restrictions eased, a number of them decided to continue. I think what will be interesting for us is to see the innovations that have occurred during the pandemic and see which ones end up staying, because they turn out to be quite valuable to people. And this was a promotional company, trucking along nicely with their pens and lanyards and all sorts of things, and suddenly no more conventions, no more face-to-face meetings, no one's placing any orders for promotion. And so they were able to turn their business into a PPE prevention company. And so with not too much drama, they were able to then produce face masks, goggles, etc., and they pivoted. Again, they could have just stopped. But they said, we can't, we want to keep our staff employed, we've got equipment. Yes, it needs modifying, but there are opportunities. And these are just some of the stories. There's loads of stories out there about businesses that have been able to change and deliver. Another one, aged care to airport temperature screening, so thermal imaging sensors. Who would have thought that, taking temperature as you come through airports or even going into hotels would be something that we would actually do, but the technology's out there. And this was a Sydney company. And then truck fabrication to defence and aerospace supply. They got some assistance from the Queensland government, and they've increased their workforce by more than 40%, and they're going to have an ongoing role in the space. But they probably weren't looking at defence and aerospace. They were going quite happily along with their truck business. Okay, so let's get into some of the techniques for how do we come up with a good idea. So these are just some of the ways that we can do this. And, some of you might be familiar with lateral thinking. So Edward de Bono, pretty well known, teaches us about how we have to change our thinking. You can't come up with innovation and great ideas unless we change the way that we think. The brain's a really powerful thing, and it can really lock us in, or it can open up opportunities for us. So the one that we're going to focus on today is lateral thinking. I'm a rule bender / breaker. If I see a rule and I think it's not working, I do look for ways around it. I do it in my organisation, and I like to challenge and say, why are we doing it that way? Why do we have this rule? And even in your own club, think about the rules that you've got. Now, some of them you can't change because it's constitutional. It's the way that Lions does things. Doesn't mean you can't push up. But have a look at all your traditions, your rules that you have. Why do you have them? Do they serve the purpose now that they were originally intended? It's a bit like the American Constitution and the right to bear arms. When the Constitution was written, it was written at a purpose and a time. One might say, well, maybe some of those rules in the Constitution are no longer valid. In fact, they're harmful now. And I challenge you to do that in your clubs. What are the things that you are doing with your rules that are preventing your membership growing, that are actually stifling your ability to perform a service? And should some of those rules be changed? I'm not saying change all of them. Rules are very helpful. It stops chaos and anarchy. But rules should evolve over time and serve a purpose. Okay, so lateral thinking, rule breaking. So these are 3 ways that we can think about rules. So what we want to do is come up with different ideas for what if. What if you only had a budget of $100 for the entire year? What would you do? If you could use all the available technology, robots, artificial intelligence, chatbots, anything, everything is at your fingertips. Or, radical event, imagine if there's no face-to-face fundraising allowed. What on earth would we do? So I want you to take now a couple of minutes. We're going to do a brainstorm sprint. Jot down on your paper, pick any of those questions or all of those questions, and then I want you to share with your table, and then I'll ask a few of you what you came up with. So the idea is to think fast and not spend too much time. Whatever is top of mind. So you can start with, what if you only had a budget of $100? What would you do? So start writing down, and then share. Or if you could use all available technology, what would you do? Or if you couldn't do any face-to-face fundraising. So I want you to jot the ideas down. Don't say to yourself that's not possible, just get the ideas down. And after you've written down as many as you can think of, share with your table. And again, don't criticise, don't be critical, it's just about the ideas. Okay, we'll do 30 seconds left, and then I'm going to ask for some volunteers. Okay, so do I have any volunteers to share an idea? Can you hear some chatter going on? Yes, gentleman in the yellow shirt. There you go. Okay, donation boxes out and promoted with $100. What else could you do? Yes.
Recycling. I mean, your cans in your box, man, 10 cents, that's quite a bit of money.
Yep, okay, yep, getting all of those bottles and cans to be dropped off. Glasses, yep. What else? Anyone have anything like really out of left field?
Look for free stuff. Whatever is free.
Whatever is free. So you go to the local Bunnings and actually they've got a lot of free stuff, a lot of offcuts of wood, things that can be made into things to help people. What else could you do?
Do some form of an IT fundraising.
Pardon?
Some form of an IT.
Yeah, remember you've got all available technology. Do something really whiz bang.
Yeah. $100 buy a second-hand computer, set up a Facebook page, use GoFundMe to raise the money.
There you go. Yep, for $100. What else? Yes, people can't get out, and you could even do that online if you wanted to. Yes.
We can steal an idea that the MS group had online. People had to walk 70 kilometres, 60 kilometres in a month, and you got people to sponsor you. But when we were locked down, you could just walk by yourself. But they raised millions doing that. I'm not saying we need to do that much, but I thought it was a great idea, but I don't know how I'd go. You have to have the technology first.
Well, you've got all the technology available. And you could do something to link to lions. It could be a lion safari in Africa that you walk the distance and use augmented reality. And you're walking suddenly, you're in the Serengeti or in a park in Kenya. And you're doing your miles and you're getting sponsored, but you link it to the brand, the lions. Any ideas on this side of the room? Yes.
Events. I picked on, we could go online, on the net, on the web, we could sell products.
Yes. What kind of products could you sell?
Oh, well, you could sell your line mints. You could
sell
sell your
masks.
line services. You could sell masks. And we could sell T-shirts. The
Yep.
possibilities, I think, to sell products. We need to sell products if there's a demand for the product, but I think there's a possibility there. We could promote services. So, where we've got people who need garden care, smoke alarms and window cleaning, we could provide a service and I'm sure we'd get a donation for that. And we could promote through the electronic system donation by giving to the cause. In other words, childhood cancer would ring well for people to make a donation to, And Lions currently have lapped the map once a year and raise a great lot of money for diabetes
Great.
on Lap the Map, and that's purely like you were talking about Serengeti and all the rest.
Yeah. So there's a number of ideas that come really from 3 sentences. But you have to say to yourself, are these really game-changing ideas? And they're probably not yet. So there's another technique I'm going to show you that pushes the boundaries just a little bit more. And it's called the Scamper technique. It's been around actually for quite a while, so acronym. And it's a problem-solving tool that we can use to brainstorm ideas. So we think about what can we substitute, what can we combine, what can we adapt, what can we modify, magnify, put to other uses, eliminate, reduce, reverse, rearrange. So what I'm going to do is go through each of those, and again we're going to do a brainstorm sprint, and I want you to see what you can come up with when I ask you a whole bunch of questions. So we'll start with S for substitute. So here's your scenario. There's an outbreak of COVID in you. Before COVID, you had regular fundraising events. Let's say you raised $20,000, so let's be modest. But since COVID, you're not allowed to hold events indoors because of social distancing and safety. So the only events you're allowed to do are outdoors, and people have to wear masks. Well, they're recommended. So your challenge is you want to continue the fundraising, and you need funds to cover costs for anything you do. So we're going to go through the Scamper framework, and we're going to have an idea about how do we break the rules of the way we currently do things and come up with a way of dealing with that particular scenario. Scenarios are very helpful to focus our attention. So one of the things that you can do in your club is to come up with a bunch of likely scenarios and then go through this technique. The technique I gave you in the previous slide was very broad. Come up with an idea. And it's actually kind of hard to focus. What you'll find is when you use a scenario, it actually allows your mind, by focusing, to come up with better ideas. So try and come up with some scenarios in your own club. Imagine that you don't get any new members, that the average age of the club is 90. What do you do? Have a think about some of those scenarios that may occur in the next 10 years and then come up with ways of, addressing them. Okay, so let's start. So we're going to start with substitute. So here are some of the questions. What materials or resources can you substitute or swap to improve an event? So the things that you would normally have in an indoor event, what can you swap out to change for an outdoor event? What other events could you link to? What processes could you use? What rules can you substitute? Can you use the event somewhere else, or is a substitute for something else that maybe isn't going ahead? What would happen if you changed your attitude towards this particular event? Now, not all of these questions are going to work every single time, but we're going to go through them anyway. All right, so I want you to think, what could you substitute about the way you currently do an event to make it work for an outdoor event and be really successful? So jot some ideas down. So these techniques are different questions. Some of them will work better than others. So it might be you can't really think of too much for this, that's okay. So think of your indoor events, think about your indoor meetings. If you have to do something outdoors, what has to change? Are there events that normally go on in your area that are cancelled because of COVID? Can you take that sort of thing over? Are there empty places that are not being used? This one's a little more challenging than the last slide. You could spend half a day on these questions, so I'm asking you to do this in like 2 minutes. Okay, we'll go through the next one. Okay, combine. This one might be a bit easier. What would happen if you combine this event with another event to create something new? What if you were to combine purposes or objectives with another organisation or another group? What could you do, what could you combine about what you do currently? You could do it with another club, or you might have 2 events that you do in a year. Could you combine those? What if if you combined talent and resources with another group of people to create a new approach to this event? So I want you to try and pick out some answers to those questions and write them down. It could be combining with another service club. It could be combining with a non-profit event, a school, a community group, a business. Strength in numbers. You can talk, you can chat. Okay, adapt. What could you adapt or readjust in this event to serve another purpose? So you might have an event you currently do, you're not able to do it outdoors. Is there anything about that event that you could do differently? It could be done digitally, or it could be put on paper, turn it into a board game. What else is the event like? Who or what could you emulate or imitate to adapt this event? What else is like your event that you could draw on? What other context could you put your event in? So you might do an annual Christmas drive, or you can't do it at Christmas because suddenly the COVID thing happens. Well, could you do it at a different time of the year, a different season? What other events or ideas could you use for inspiration to help you change the way that you do that event? Imagine doing the M1 convention completely outdoors. What would that do to the event? What would you have to do differently? Maybe it's bring your own chair. Maybe people buy chairs. Maybe they sponsor a chair. Maybe they put their name on a chair. Fundraising opportunities. Maybe it becomes a camping trip. I'm not saying all the ideas are good, by the way. We just get them out. Okay, the next one is modify or magnify. Go big or go home. How would you change the shape, look, or feel of your event? How could you make it bigger? What could you add to modify the event? Do you want to throw in a music festival along with it? Do you want to add a competition to it? An art show? What can you add to the event that you're thinking about to make it bigger? Do you want to go along with it? What could you emphasise or highlight more to turn an aspect of your event into something like it's like an event within an event? And what element of your event could you strengthen to create something new? It could be a spin-off. So jot down the ideas. At the moment we're just about ideas. Okay, eliminate. We've been adding stuff. What do we need to take away? What could you do to streamline or simplify the event? Think of all the processes that get in the way of running an event. What could you do better? What could you take out? Automation. Think of all the manual processes that you do that take a huge amount of time, and that's time you're not spending on something that might yield a better outcome. So what can you take out? What features, parts, or rules could you eliminate? Is everything really necessary? Is it adding value? What could you understate or tone down? How could you make it smaller? So the last one was about making something bigger. How do we make something in bits of the event smaller, faster, lighter, more fun? And what would happen if you took away part of the event? Because that frees up time for something else. And if you were going to take part of an event away, what would you do in its place? So jot down some ideas there. Imagine you couldn't have the dinner at the convention for whatever reason. What would you do? There was a scavenger hunt. Progressive dinner. I don't know, there's lots of things you'd have to do. You might not want to do it, but what could you do? And the last one, I like this, and it might seem a bit counterintuitive, but it's great for ideas. What if you were to do the exact opposite of what you're trying to do now? Think of what the opposite would look like. Could you get some ideas from that? What components in the event could you substitute to change the order of the event? I don't know. Champagne breakfast instead of dinner. Maybe the audience is all on stage and the speakers are in the audience. I don't know if anyone's ever been to a People's Messiah. I went to one at the Opera House, and basically the audience was the choir, so they were the performers, and it was conducted from the centre. But you sat in alto, tenor, soprano, bass, and you had to bring your own score with you, and you were the choir. And the people who were sitting in the middle were actually just dignitaries who were listening. It was kind of cool, reversed. The performers and the audience. It was absolutely fantastic. It was an amazing event to be at, to sing and be part of something like that in the Opera House. There's an idea for Christmas, People's Messiah. Everyone brings their own music. You just need your soloist and you'll be good to go. Okay, so first of all, let's get some commentary about that technique. Now, that was harder. Why was that hard? First of all, who found that hard? Am I making assumptions? Okay. Why was that hard?
Too broad.
You found it too broad. Okay.
You've got to think it through.
Yeah.
You've got to think it. You've got to think it through.
Yeah, they're really, really tough questions. These are not things that easily come top of mind. Why else was it hard for people? Pardon? Yeah. Because you're like, but hang on, if you're thinking of your convention or a fundraising, but it's work. I like it. I don't want to change it. It's always worked for us. It's hard, isn't it? Especially if you enjoy the way that things are currently done, right? And I'm not saying change for change's sake, by the way. I'm saying question it. And then if you decide to do the same thing, at least you're doing it by choice, not default. And there's a reason to stick with what you're doing. And you've thought it through. Personally, for me, with this, I had something in my mind. I'm thinking again my convention, so I think David's point is general. I think it's easier to think about a particular event than just any event. And you could do this for every single fundraising event you do and just go through that process. Or you could even look at it and say, the way we run our meetings. Let's put Scamper over the meeting. What should we eliminate? What should we do differently? What could we do? You know, you can use this with anything. We use this to design up new services and new products. You just substitute the word event and add your own word in. Okay, actually, before I do that, so what are some of the ideas? So the ideas that you should have come up with, as hard as they were, will be different to what we came up with in the previous slide. You had to work harder, but the idea would have been more innovative. So, out of all of those questions, can someone tell me an idea they came up with? Yes? Great! Sports on the beach.
Excuse me, Rebekah, we're having trouble hearing the questions across the room, so if you could put your hand up, wait a second, we'll get a mic to you.
Great, thank you. Yeah, that's great. Okay, next idea.
Okay, I'm Gail Bowman from Old Bar Club. For about 13 years or so, we've been selling eggs, oversized eggs, every Saturday. So when the COVID was severe, we did a home delivery. Two of us members were there on a Saturday, took the names and addresses and phone numbers of people and said, how often do you want them? Some wanted them weekly, some wanted them fortnightly. We had list 1, list 2. I had their numbers. I would call them and say, do you want eggs this week? Yes. So by knowing who wanted the eggs, we could pre-order them. We had them delivered to our line shed. Instead of having it on a Saturday morning outside the pharmacy post office, we would myself and another lady would deliver on a Thursday morning. The eggs had only just come in on the Wednesday night. We had a list of who wanted them, picked them up, X amount of boxes, and go boom, 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 boom. The people had the money out the front. We just delivered, money's there, pick up, bang, all over and done with in an hour or two on the Thursday, rather than having to get all our equipment, and we had boulders later on and tables set up, etc., as the COVID restrictions lessened. So we were still able to do our service by delivering them to the people, and sometimes people would call me and say, look, can you deliver me some eggs? Yeah, no problem. So that was a personalised thing. In saying that, one man gave us some vegetables and someone else gave us some soap, and just to say thank you for the service that we did. And
Fantastic.
it was great.
And is that something you would keep, that kind of delivery service, once things exist for the moment? And so you might step back into a hybrid system.
Well, now our numbers have gone up. We're selling 40 boxes a week.
There you go. Fantastic. Excellent example.
Good advertising. Good advertising.
Great. Yes, we've got a hand here. And then Bill over there. Great.
Yep. We had a changeover dinner that was very late this year because of COVID, and it turned out to be Halloween day, Halloween night. We said, oh, let's get into costume Halloween. Could well have masks, couldn't it? If it wasn't a Halloween one, maybe you could do a mask outside party like Venice or something. We could cater for the group using one of the catering places around the place so that we weren't bringing food from everywhere else, which was apparently a problem, but it would help the restaurant around the place. We could use all our technology to invite people and to invite others in, of course, all the other Lions clubs from around the area, and perhaps our local schools might wish to come into it. We could perhaps get the history group into it because the history of mask wearing might be of interest, and also pull up history of other diseases that have affected history and how people survived and came to here. Games. Put some games into it. Without, how about games of snakes or ladders or something, which means your clothing is, you could still be 1.5 apart, you know, you've still got your mask on, but you're having a bit of fun. We'd have it in October or November because it's warm enough to be outdoors. How about making it bigger, add music or a dance section, or somebody rather, you know, if it's Venice, maybe we could have some ballroom dancing sort of thing. Maybe we get a bit of something fancy in the dance department. Then how to change it a bit, get a bit more environmental, make everybody make their costumes out of recyclable junk, which could be interesting. We could set up a database, use our previous databases, use the right equipment to try to eliminate and reduce and use stuff that we already got. Then take out the children aspect of it because it might be a bit OH&S-y, and emphasise the adult fun, or appropriate the plans to change it completely, reverse it. We're now going to a very adult upmarket dinner outside under the stars, very refined, all beautiful, beautiful, beautiful instead of the Halloween thing. So there's some changes. Watch us in November. Thank you.
Yeah, that's great. I love the idea of actually going with the mask and making that a feature of the event, a mask parade, so to speak, with the Venice thing. That sounds really exciting. Bill?
Yeah, as a district, we've got a lot of facilities and assets that allow us to do a number of things, and running an outdoor convention would probably be fairly easy. I know that, for instance, when we did the World Rally, we had the capability just within Zone 4 to cater and cook for 10,500 people. We set up a field kitchen in the field, got a water tank, a generator, and we set up a whole range of things. With the COVID restrictions, obviously we had to put in the takeaway containers and do stuff like that. But I know at Taree, when they run a convention down there, a lot of their meals were cooked outdoors. We were down around the rowing club there, and it was all set up. So it was some minor additions, and as for additional staffing, we've worked, I know, again with Rebekah and various other organisations where we've 4 or 5 service groups combined to run things like river festivals and all sorts of stuff. So I believe that if we look at what we've got within our zones and our regions, we'd be damn surprised at what we can do. And I know in the fires, for instance, we had about 18 clubs on the front line supporting and feeding emergency staff, people coming out of the scrub in survival mode. So there's a hell of a lot we can do outdoors just by the stuff that we've already got. It's just a case of putting it together and working together to do it.
I agree, and I think they're great ideas, Bill, working with the assets that you've got. So if you think about the fact that people can't travel overseas, in fact sometimes we can't get outside of our states, but people still want holidays. They're looking for festivals, they're looking for things to do. So I've got more service leave in the second half of the year, can't go to Europe, so we're going to do kind of a little road trip, even though we don't have a full drive. And what I need to do is to look up where are all the local festivals and events so I can kind of plan the order. We want to go to regional towns, but I don't want to rock up and there's like nothing on. Or go, oh, you should have been here last weekend, it was great. Lions could do something like that, put together, some sort of road trip thing, or see where there's gaps in the festival calendars and what can you put together with other groups locally to draw people in. Because people, I think, do have a will to go to regional towns. They want to support regional Australia, but also there's a perception, it's safer. It's outdoors, there's less people around. I think there's a really great opportunity to do some great fundraising as people are looking for things to do. Okay, so we'll leave that there. So, why don't we innovate? If it works so well, and we know that we have to innovate over time, well, why don't we? Well, a lot of it is to do with perceived risk. And these are the dimensions of perceived risk. Financial risk. Oh, we can't make money in that, that's not going to work. It'll cost us too much. Performance risk. The event would be rubbish. Singers are not going to be that great, and people aren't really going to enjoy it, and then they're going to think Lions is terrible. Physical risk. We can do that because that's too dangerous, or we haven't got the right equipment, or whatever it might happen to be. And physical risk can also be COVID as well. Social risk. We can embarrass ourselves. We look stupid. What will people think of Lions if we do this? And then psychological risk. My identity will be harmed. My ego want to cope with this. Now, I'm not saying these are bad things. This is what our brains do to protect ourselves from risk. We're hardwired to avoid risk, and the older that we get, the more we're trying to avoid risk, because it's a survival mechanism. That's why when you're in your 20s, you do all kinds of crazy things, risky behaviours. We're biologically programmed to do that. As we get older, we're biologically programmed to avoid risk. And that also means innovation. So how do people react when they perceive risk? Well, this is a really nice framework that I use around innovation. So if you follow the line, so the dotted pink lines connect economic risk and our habits, and what we do is we postpone. So someone comes up with an idea in the club, you know what, we'll talk about that at the next meeting. Yeah, we'll get to that. Put on the delay board. So if we're worried about financial or habit, that's the behaviour that we exhibit. The next resistance level, and we're moving up a hierarchy here, is where we just flat out reject it. No, that won't work. No, we're not doing that. No. Yeah, that's lovely. Thank you. No. We come to that when we're getting a little more of the risk. So it's economic, it's functional, as in it won't work or function, or it's social risk, when it's combined with habit and our perceived image. So if we experience any level of threat there, our knee-jerk reaction is to say no. And then finally, you've got opposition, where it's absolute sort of like placard wearing. We're not doing this, activism, phoning all the friends on the committee going, so-and-so's going to say this, we're all together on this, right? We're not doing it. It's really active resistance. And that comes from physical risk, functional risk, social risk, challenging our traditions and norms, and our perceived image. That's the highest level of threat that we experience. So have a think yourself, have you ever engaged in any of those resistance behaviours? Have you seen other people doing any of these things? Well, this is why. And what we've got to do is go, how do we lower that perceived risk? Because it's not that you're wrong with having perceived risk, it is programmed into us. So we have to be conscious of what we're doing and what other people are doing, and not say, you're stupid, you shouldn't do that. We've got to reduce the risk. You can't change that end, you have to change this end. We've got to think about why we're doing this as tradition. Why is our habit this way? Why are people feeling so threatened? If you can remove the threat, then you remove the resistance. And then this is how our brain works. So I don't know if any of you are familiar with the field of behavioural economics, cognitive bias, behavioural biases. The way our brain works is it automates a lot of our decision making. If we had to make decisions about every single thing we did, we would be like 10 hours getting out of bed. Because we're like, first I've got to take my thing, and then I've got to pull the covers up, and I'll pull the covers up, and I've got to find my shoes, and what am I going to wear today? And like, if you had to make conscious decisions about every single thing you did, you'd be flat out getting out of the door. So what our brain does to help us is it automates a whole bunch of decision makings. We make snap decisions at a subconscious level constantly. And these are called biases. Now the problem is that while these can help us operate and actually get on with our daily life, they're often flawed. And these are just some of the common ones that drive our decision making, that drive risk. So an example is status quo bias. It's a preference for what we've already got. We don't like change because change is unknown, and with the unknown comes threat and risk and maybe death. So we go, no, I'm quite happy the way I am right now. I don't want to change because I don't know what that's going to come, that's going to bring. I at least know what is going to happen if I continue doing what I'm going to do. So we have a preference. We are hardwired to stick with what we know. And the older we get, actually, the more that we do that. Again, this is hardwired into us. I'm not going to go through all of these biases, but I'll highlight a couple of them. Sunk cost effect. We've always done it this way. We've already put all this effort in, so we need to continue because we've already invested this. It's like we're unwilling to cut our losses. And so we just keep sinking more time and effort into something because we've already sunk time and effort in. If you really think about it, you're like, why do we do that? But this is what we do. Loss aversion. If somebody says to you that if you do something you will lose money, say you will lose $100, but if you do the behaviour, you'll gain $200. What do you think most people do? Do you think they worry about the loss of $100 or the gain of $200? Actually, it's more the loss. There are experiments on experiments that says even if the gain is greater, we're motivated by loss and gain. So what we see is advertisements that say, if you will lose money if you don't do this, as opposed to you will gain money. The loss framing actually drives our behaviour for whatever reason. And it's proven time and time again because loss is about risk. Confirmation bias. We think something's a dumb idea, and so we go searching for evidence that it's a dumb idea. And then someone says, no, but did you know that such and such a club did it? Oh yeah, but they had lots of money. They knew someone, and so you discount it mentally. And so what we do is we read and search for stuff that confirms our existing opinion. So if we want to change things, we go looking for things. And then we show all our friends and go, look, the newspaper article. We share it on Facebook. And it's all to confirm our own opinion. And we're largely unaware that this is actually what's going on in our brain. So the first thing that's useful is, if you are feeling uncomfortable about change or resisting, just take a moment to go, why am I feeling uncomfortable? Am I feeling threatened? Why am I feeling threatened? Maybe it's reasonable, because that instinct of survival is important. One of the techniques that we use, and it was developed in the UK by the Behavioural Insights team, it was formed in the Department of Premier and Cabinet in the UK. The Department of Prime Minister and Cabinet in Australia also now has one of these, and most of the states have a Behavioural Insights unit. And so they developed this really easy framework to help us address biases and overcome resistance and make change. And so what we do is we say, let's make it easy. Have a think about your processes in general. Is it easy for people to be a member? Is it easy for people to register for your event? Is it easy for people to come to your meeting? If the answer is no, then how can you make it easier? How do we make it attractive? How do we appeal to those biases? Rather than trying to fight them, how do we appeal to them? How do we reward people? Maybe people don't want to sign up for a year and be a member. Maybe they just want to come to one thing, feel good, go away. Well, great, you've got an extra pair of pants. They were never going to sign up anyway, so at least you got them for a little bit and maybe they will come back. How do we make it social? Social norms. So how do we make people, it's a sense of belonging, and I think that's one of the greatest strengths of Lions is all of you, all of us. It's great people. That's why I like coming back to the convention, because I'm getting to know everyone over time. And it's really nice to come back and go, so what have you been up to? And you're all so friendly. This is a lovely group. And that incentivises me to want to be part of it. And then secondly, timing. Timing's important. So when you send an SMS reminder or alert or a phone call about the X, timing matters. What day of the week, what time of the year, and even with recruiting members. When is the right time to get someone? Is at the moment they've retired? Probably not, because people already kind of have their retirement plans. It's probably not while they're raising kids and running around doing the school run either. So finding the time in people's lives as they go through their life events is important. Transitioning jobs. There are different times to get members. There are different times to serve people. So if you combine all of those things, it's a really easy way of questioning what you do, but also coming up with some different solutions. So an example of the EAST framework, and I'm going to pick on EASY here, and they overcame physical risk. This was a winery that is a restaurant in Brisbane. Now they sell experiences, it is not cheap, and you come and you've got someone explaining the wine, it's all paired with the meals, and it's done in a wine cellar, it's all really lovely. And they sell wine, obviously, as well. Suddenly they can't have people there. So they started doing online curated experiences that were the same. So you've got your food and wine arrived on the day, and then you logged into Zoom, and you were there with a few other different households on Zoom, and you had your personalised person who's telling you all about the different wines and telling you what to do, and you're interacting with other people on Zoom. So you could have your experience at home, you're still doing it live. The only thing is, it was in your home. And it was a massive hit. There's been a lot of restaurants that have done really similar things. In fact, they managed to get all of their staff employed through the pandemic and now planning to move to Chinese and Eastern markets with the product. So I know the owner of this particular business, and they sat down with the employees and went, what are we going to do? And so instead of having staff serving as waiters, they were delivery staff, delivering out all of the food and wine as people signed up. They were booked out, and they were making really good money. Now they've returned back to face-to-face dining, but they've kept this particular product. This was a stage furniture. So you're thinking theatre, like that just died. What do you do if you're the person or the business that's providing all the props? Well, they went into flat packs for office equipment, because a lot of the stuff that they did was very lightweight, because it's stage. It's meant to look like it's a brick, but it's actually just that light wood. So they turned them into easy to assemble, like flat pack for office furniture. And I don't know if any of you tried to get any office furniture at the beginning of COVID, but it was almost impossible. And with the supply lines to overseas markets cut and lengthy delays, you couldn't get desks, you couldn't get chairs. There's a whole bunch of things you just could not get. And yet, if you had to work at home or homeschool, you needed these things. So they've done really well. They've even hired new staff who found themselves out of work during the pandemic. So in summary, some of the strategies to reduce resistance to change, we want to think about the behaviours that are tripping people up, that are creating barriers for them to engage in the process. We can eliminate steps in the process. So for instance, BMW in 2005 developed a fuel cell car that had both hydrogen and petrol. So when one ran out, the other one kicked in, and you can continue on your journey. So they knew that it was a barrier for people in having to go and refuel or wait until the power would click back on. You can seek out people currently not engaged in your behaviour. So unengaged means they don't have something. So Kodak in 1888 targeted non-professional photographers. They didn't target people who liked taking photos. They found people who liked photographs, but currently weren't engaged. So you can look out for people who are not currently involved in lines or who need something. And then find believers. So find your people who are going to advocate for you. So electric vehicles, when they first came out, targeted the environmentally conscious. They already had a willing, ready market. Those people then tell other people, but they also make it profitable enough for the electric vehicles to continue in the innovation stage. So, you know, people like the politicians that we had today, let's see if they actually live up to the rhetoric. How great do they really think Lions is? Well, ask them to join. I'd come to several conventions and no one had ever asked my husband and I to join. And I happened to make that comment when I was at the Townsville Multi-District Convention. Yep, John came straight away as he thanked me and said, would you like to be a member? And we sort of went, yes. And then Barry Palmer got up that afternoon and inducted us. There was no getting away. we were in, you know. But how many times do you have people you tell and you never ask the question? Look, the worst they can say is no. And as long as you don't take that personally, you just go, well, that's a no for today. I'll try again another time. Timing. So what I've taken you through is a framework that we use called service design. So the little bit at the top, concept development and ideation, that's what we've done. What we would normally do is do all the front bit, set the scene, work it out, define our markets, and then we would take all those ideas and start putting them through a fairly rigorous process to say, all right, well, if we were to do it differently, what might that look like? What's the business case? Put some numbers around it, and then we'd start to test it. So that's the overall process that I would normally do, and we've just done that little bit in the middle. And so the reason we've got the double diamond is we diverge in our thinking, and then we converge. And then we diverge again, and then we converge. So that's the reason for the picture there. And that's it. Thank you very much.
Maybe we should really blame COVID for Rebekah being here, because if we'd have held our convention in October and COVID wasn't around, she would have been overseas, so we wouldn't have had her here tonight, today. Thank you very much, Rebekah.